right, greetings, Umbraphiles. Welcome to the Center for Inquiry lecture series for our final solar eclipse themed event before the big day, April 8th, 2024, the Great American Total Solar Eclipse. I have my eclipse glasses ready, and we are all hoping for clear skies here in Western New York and all throughout the path of totality. Before we get started tonight, I just want to take a moment to shout out the Buffalo Eclipse Consortium and the Buffalo Astronomical Association, two organizations that we here at CFI have worked alongside and learned so much from as we prepared our community for this truly once-in-a-lifetime event. I'd also like to extend my sincere gratitude to everyone who has served on our Center for Inquiry Eclipse Planning Committee. My fellow staff and volunteers have put in countless hours of their time to make our Eclipse event series a reality and have put up with my regular Eclipse facts of the day. Despite my urge to share all of those with you right now, I will leave the spotlight for tonight's guest and instead recommend that you check out the most recent edition of Free Inquiry magazine, where you will find, among many other great articles, two pieces on the solar eclipse, one of which is my first contribution to the magazine, an article titled Gather the Shadow Lovers. And with that shameless plug, I now bring you tonight's presentation, Solar Superstitions and Moon Myths. Indeed, humans have always been fascinated by what goes on in our skies. Celestial events, including eclipses, meteors, and comets, were long thought to be messages from the gods and good or evil portents. Greek myths claim that the sun is carried across the sky by Helios in a golden chariot, while other traditions reveal that vampires fear sunlight and moonlight creates werewolves. From canals observed on Mars to Batmen on the moon, the moon landing hoax to flat earthers, there are plenty of skeptical lessons to be learned along the way. And so tonight, we welcome Benjamin Radford to provide some of those lessons. Ben is a scientific paranormal investigator, a research fellow at the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer, and author, co-author, contributor, or editor of 20 books and over 1,000 articles on skepticism, critical thinking, and science literacy. Ben, welcome to the show. It looks like you are prepared.
I'm all ready to go. I have to admit that because the time difference, I'm in New Mexico, so I'm Mountain Time. I may have misunderstood when the eclipse is. I've been staring at the sun all day. People have been looking at me weird, so I think I know why.
At least you are well protected with the glasses. If you're going to be
That's
staring
right.
at the sun, that is the way to do it.
Right. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, that's that is a mistake. One
I
that
thought it might be comedic if I put these on to start the lecture, but I wasn't sure
oh
if I'd be able to click the buttons. So
no, I totally
we did
understand.
it this
And
way. But the floor is now yours. I've really been looking forward to this lecture. Thank you for doing this for us.
yeah, no, I thank you, Eric, and thank everybody but Kenny Biddle. Well, I guess thank him as well because he's done some stuff there. But it's super cool. As many of you know, I was originally slated to do this about a month or two back, and due to the infamous Buffalo winters, I was that did not happen. But I'm happy to share the talk that I would have given then. And of course, again, this is preparation for the eclipse. So, without further ado, let me see if I can share my screen. Sometimes this is acting up, sometimes it's not. We will see what it wants to do. Let's see here. That's not sharing. Are you seeing something that looks like a slide?
Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
Very good then. Okay. So, with that, yes, I did slightly tweak the title of my my talk. I'm a fan of alliteration, and so I couldn't help but include eclipse eschatology, just because I thought it sounded cool. Eschatology is of course the study of the end times, and this is a running theme that you find in many legends and rumors and stories about myths and so on. So as you might imagine. As you pointed out, for millennia, people have sought signs in our personal and collective futures in the skies. And so, everything from eclipses, meteors, and other celestial events were often seen as supernatural portents. Sometimes of fortune, but more often of misfortune, right? And when you think about it, that makes sense, right? Because hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people were more connected in some ways and more subject to nature and storms and eclipses and the world around them. These days, of course, we pay attention to the weather report if we're going to be, if we want to know about traffic or travel plans or things like that. But for the most part, it's sort of inconvenience. But we have to remember that for most of humankind in past in history, the events around them, what the skies are saying, what the seasons changing, the things that we could read into them were very important. In some cases, a case of life and death. And for that reason, astronomical events and ancient people were looking for basically two different things. They were looking for they want explanation and significance. So that's what they're searching for. So let's see here where we go. So what we find is that it's important to keep in mind that when we see people talking, when we're talking about rumors and myths and stories, is that we can look on them sort of from a modern lens, right? We can look at it and say, okay, well, it's just these were silly superstitions, or why do they believe this? But it's important to keep in mind that at the time, although they were weird and retrospectively wrong, they were often a logical conclusion based upon the worldview at the time, right? If your belief was, and you didn't know anything about germ theory, for example, then you might reasonably suspect that the disease was caused by God as a punishment or things like that. So the premises reflected, and some of the legends I'm going to talk about reflected basically what they thought were going on. In many cases, it was a post hoc fallacy. For fans of Latin fallacies, of course, this is the post hoc ergo propter hoc. This is a very common fallacy and an error in logical thinking. And basically, it means after this, therefore, because of it. And so this is often reasons why some of these legends and superstitions came up, was that something notable or weird or bad happened after an eclipse, for example, or after a meteor was seen, or a storm or something. Maybe there was a drought, maybe there were stillbursts, maybe there was lightning, whatever else. And somebody saw the connection and said, oh my God, the meteor brought this tragedy. And keep in mind that you don't need to have everybody believe it, right? So it's not like everybody in the medieval world or everybody 200 years ago had to believe in a certain superstition. It was more a matter of how you just need enough people to keep the story alive, enough people to sort of be worried about it and lock into it. And keep in mind that when you're talking about the psychology of superstitions, which is a fascinating topic, I've written about it. The last editor of Skeptical Inquirer, Stuart and Weiss, wrote a book on superstitions. And one thing you find is that people err on the side of belief, right? And so when you have superstitions about the world, the danger is perceived to be in not doing something, right? If you're a gambler, you don't want to not bring your lucky rabbit's foot, or not wear your stinky pair of shoes or what have you, because of course that is perceived to be the cause of bad luck. And so oftentimes the investment in the belief is fairly minor, right? Okay, carry a lucky quarter in your pocket. There's little cost to that, but there's potentially good comeback from it. Let's see here. Dun dun. See if there we go. So again, as I was talking about, people tended to live closer to death centuries ago. And so, people had to sort of, predict and remember some of the lessons about what happens when meteors come, or what happens when eclipses come. And so keep in mind that, if farmers need to know what crops to plant, for example, or what times, they couldn't just call Uber Eats, right? You had to, this was in many cases literally life and death. So people needed ways to remember. So they created folklore and rhymes. And this is a common one. There's many of them. Again, this sort of brings in the folklore that I, of course, am a fan of. And you've probably heard either the entire thing or some of it. This one says, evening red and morning gray will speed traveler on his way. but evening gray and morning red will pour down rain upon his head. Another one, again, probably one of the more famous ones is a rainbow in the morning will give a sailor delight. A rainbow at night is the sailor's delight. Will give a sailor a rainbow in the morning will give a sailor warning. A rainbow at night is the sailor's delight. So again, you have these beliefs that are codified and memorialized in rhymes that are taught to children. And of course, as the children grow up, they become fishermen, they could become farmers, they become sailors, and this is ingrained in what they do. And keep in mind that it's not just rare events that can cause these. Even full moons, which are fairly common, right? I mean, the reason that I'm giving this talk is, of course, because of the eclipse, which I just found out is not today, but in fact Monday. But instead, even relatively common phenomena such as full moons have inspired strange beliefs about everything from werewolves to madness, as I'll talk about before. Some of the slides I'm showing here, and these are especially interesting. So this is these are I decided to sort of give some samples, historical examples. Right, here's a excuse me, a print from 1184 that's basically depicting this comet and the tragedy that befell at this time. Right, you see you see people running in fear. You see cattle dying. So this is probably depicting some actual event in 1184. And so what you find is that a lot of times the weather lore can be traced to astrology. For example, Mars is a red planet and relatively close to the sun. Therefore, it's linked with heat and fire and passion. Saturn is the most distant of the planets, and therefore it's produced it's said to be cold and dour and things like that. And here, for example, in the slide we're seeing now, oftentimes shooting stars were thought to be driven by high winds, right? So it's very difficult to know, you see something streaking in the sky. Is it miles away, thousands of miles away? Who knows, right? There's nothing to compare it to. So in ancient belief, it seemed reasonable that, well, it's just especially windy day. It may not be windy down here, but when you're at that altitude, maybe that's what's shooting the stars. Maybe the winds are strong enough. And so therefore, there sort of arose this belief that we should expect wind to come from the direction in which the stars are seen. So if it's some evening and you see a shooting star going from east to west, then the assumption and belief is that, well, there's going to be a strong wind coming east to west sometime soon. So let's sort of give a handful of examples about some of the legends and lore. So I'll start with the weather. I'll start with some of the myths about weather, and then move on to the sun, and then the moon, and then the eclipse, which is of course a combination of the sun and the moon. Again, here's a couple other slides where people are showing scary things. You're seeing this is a blood rain apparently in 1364, and so you have there's been cases of things falling from the sky. There are what were called Fortean frog falls, where, for example, a tornado would whisk small animals, frogs and small fish and things like that, and they would rain down upon people. So there's a whole category of Fortean phenomena, including these sort of mysterious falls like that. Here's another example as well. So keep in mind that when we're talking about the sun is of course dangerous, and it can blind you if you look at it without protection. So here for example is a depiction of three suns, or oranges, depending on. They look kind of like lemons, but I don't think that's it. But again, as I was saying, the sun, even though it's the life giver, it's sort of the symbol of happiness and health and things like that. It can harm you. It can blind you. I mean, even I'm sorry, losing my train of thought, but even again, going back to some of the earliest legends and myths were about the sun, right? You had in Greek mythology, this is something that Even if you don't know anything about Greek mythology, most people have heard about Helios, the handsome young man who was crowned with the shining aureole of the sun, and he drove the chariot across the sky. And again, as I mentioned, the sun is both beneficial and dangerous. So, it can blind you if you look at it. Even young children know this. Of course, it's also a carcinogen. It's the sun is as much of a life giver as it is one of the source of one of the most common types of cancer, skin cancer. So there's lots of superstitions about the sun. One of the more interesting ones, and this is a case that I've researched, as has Joe Nickel, formerly at the organization. Of course, he still writes columns in Skeptical Inquirer magazine. Was the Fatima Miracle of the sun. It's kind of a complex story. I'm only going to sort of hit on a couple of the highlights, but this is basically the story outlined in these slides here. It says the last apparition of Fatima, which is in Fatima, Portugal, was accompanied by one of the most impressive and public miracles abundantly documented in modern history, the event known as the Miracle of the Sun. On October 13th, 1917, in Bolivia, about 70,000 people witnessed the sun dancing in the sky in a zigzag pattern with multicolored lights. The phenomena lasted about 10 minutes. In the crowd were also reporters, researchers, politicians, academics, and atheists. As far as I know, there's no actual good quantified how many atheists were there. I'm guessing it was few, if any, because they wouldn't have shown up for this particular miracle. But anyway, and there on the right is actually it's in Portuguese, but it's some of the early coverage of that. So again, what had happened basically was that this is a kind of a photo of it. So basically, again, in a nutshell, it was in 1917, and there were three children there were three young shepherd children who had the Virgin Mary appear to them while they were out in the fields. And Mary only appeared to the three of them. In fact, mainly to one young girl, and then the other two sort of went along with the story and sort of supported it. But adults didn't really see them, and so as they went into the fields, Mary would appear to them, and they would talk to them. As the story circulated, people, the children started telling people, like, I saw Blessed Virgin Mary in the fields, and more people were interested and came along with it. And so Mary would tell the children that she would appear at different times, each successive month, and then sort of give messages and so on. And there was one final appearance that she would where she would give some revelations. And again, she would only appear to the children, and she would urge repentance, and predicting an end to World War II, which was going on at the time, and also saying that they should build a chapel on the site. So what happened on this one day, again, October 13th, was that this happened. Now, this is not actually a photo of the sun miracle. This is what actually that is an original photo of the miracle of the sun. So again, headlines, and then this is kind of what they saw. It's important, of course, to have that red arrow in there to just clarify exactly what was going on there. So there's a couple things to point out. So I'll just go with the more dramatic photo because it's the one that people prefer, obviously. So part of the story is true. There were certainly tens of thousands of people there. It's not quite true that 70,000 people all saw the same thing. In fact, what happened was that people reported a wide variety of things. Some people reported that, yes, the sun had, they said, danced, was their term, around the sky. Other people said that the sun had zigzagged around the world, or across the sky. And in fact, some people were concerned that the sun might actually collide with Earth. Well, of course, it wouldn't collide with Earth; it would burn it up. But that was a concern. Other people reported seeing seeing sort of like psychedelic colors coming out of the sun, pinwheel patterns and things like that. Other people didn't see anything at all. So a significant number of people didn't. Their people all around them are saying, "Oh my God, are you seeing this?" And they're like, "No, I'm not." So the question then becomes, again, this is apparently the best photograph of the miracle of the sun. The question then becomes, well, what were people seeing? And again, this is a complicated case. So I could do a whole talk on it. I just want to touch on some highlights. Basically, we can look at things from an investigative point of view, right? So what we know for a fact did not happen is that the sun did not, in fact, dance around the skies. We know this because we're all under the same sun. There's not a separate sun over Portugal that just happens to dance. A sun that actually moved around the skies in some unusual way would be seen by billions of people around the world, not just in this one location. So we know for a fact that didn't happen, just objectively. And then the question is, okay, well, what did happen? So, and if people have questions, I can talk about this in the Q&A. But basically, the fact that some people didn't see anything and there was this wide variety of phenomena suggests that there was a psychological explanation. That there was what's called folie à deux. There were different aspects to it. And again, the fact is that not everybody saw the same thing, and so this sun miracle was almost certainly not what was claimed to be. For those who would like more information on this, there's Joe's article on it, and there's also an article that I wrote as well. So let me move on. We talked about some of the sun. Let's talk about the moon now. So the moon is honestly, I think, far more interesting than the sun, with all due respect to the sun. It's more evocative, right? I mean, the moon, it's kind of bright and, again, gives you sunburn, cancer, things like that. The moon is kind of friendlier, nicer, more romantic. It's always held sway over human fears and imagination. So, moonlight, and of course, keep in mind that scientifically and optically, moonlight is sunlight. It's just reflected off the surface of the moon back onto the Earth. So moonlight is actually sunlight, just reflected, and it's said to be powerful indeed. And when I was researching this, in terms of the folklore, it was fascinating to sort of see all the different aspects and different things that people believed were going on. As late as the 1950s, mothers refused to hang out their babies' nappies out in the moonlight for fear of bad luck. So bring it in before the moon's out because your kid's gonna get diaper rash or worse. A 1621 Guide to Healthy Living helpfully offered the following advice. When thou goest to thy bed, draw close the curtains to shut out the moonlight, which is very offensive and hurtful to the brain, especially to those that sleep. There's some truth to this, right? I mean, if you're trying to sleep and it's a full moon, the moon can be actually pretty bright. So, there's a grain of truth to that. Hurtful to the brain, I think, is a bit extreme, but whatever. The infamous witch finding manual, Malleus Maleficarum, which, of course, for those who have researched the occult and witchcraft and things like that, is one of those sort of seminal books. In 1486, notes that, quote, the stars can influence the devils themselves. Certain men who are called lunatics are molested by devils more at one time than another, and the devils would rather molest them at all times unless they themselves were deeply affected by certain phases of the moon. So this is interesting, right? Because the witch finding manual, the Hammer of the Witches, is saying that the moon is so powerful. Not only does it have this influence over ordinary mortal men, it's so powerful it can control demons and supernatural entities. That's it's remarkable just to sort of see, reading between the lines, just how powerful they thought that it was. And because of the moon's silvery glow, again reflected off the moon, it was believed to be made of silver. And so that's one reason why the metal silver became one of its symbols of the moon, this sort of silvery glow. And it was also believed that to see the thin crescent over the left shoulder was lucky, and any wish made at the first sight of a new moon would come true. So again, as we talked about in terms of the weather rhymes and the folklore and the legends, here's one that says, "New moon, new, let me see who is my future husband to be. The color of his hair, or not, bald men can be sexy too, the clothes he is to wear, and the happy day he is to wed me. So we sort of see some of the legend stories about this, and keep in mind, for example, that a lot of this is associated with luck and superstition and prophecy. Another example would be that it was said that if you pointed at the moon 9 times, you would have bad luck. And this has always struck me because this is a superstition from the British Isles, and the idea was that if you point at the moon 9 times, you can't enter heaven, no matter how pious you were. So, as with a lot of these legends and rumors, you have to sort of parse out. Like, how does that work? Like, is that 9 times in a row? Is that 9 times over like a lifetime? I mean, you have to have a pretty good memory, right? Like, oh my God, when I was 13, I pointed at the moon. When I was 18, I pointed at the moon twice. I'm just picturing, and you know what I would do as a skeptic? I would point at the moon like 8 times and then be like, oh, I'm not pointing. And then like, just point with a knuckle and just sort of to tempt the faith to see, to see how seriously they took this whole thing. And keep in mind, for example, that there's lots of superstitions about the moon, and another one is rabbit's feet, which of course rabbit's feet are widely known and believed to be lucky and things like that. But did you know why and what makes a rabbit's foot especially powerful? Well, one answer is that for a rabbit's foot to be especially powerful, especially lucky, you have to have a certain procedure. You can't just have any rabbit. There's not Peter Rabbit, not there's certain rabbits you can choose. But to be most effective, the rabbit foot has to be the left hind leg of a rabbit killed under a full moon. So again, this is getting complicated, right? Not just any rabbit. Get a rabbit, the left hind leg of a rabbit under full moon, but it gets even more complicated because it has to be killed by a cross-eyed person. And again, once again, we see the legends and stories, right? We have this influence of the beliefs about the evil eye, and people who are cross-eyed or wall-eyed or have blind in one eye, they're often looked at as being cursed or being able to cast curses with the evil eye. So you have the cross-eyed person killing rabbits under full moon, all these sort of blending together. And I love these sorts of stories because there's so much folklore packed into them, and it's just remarkable. So I'm going to touch on a case which is one of my favorites. I've written about this in the past. And again, like the Miracle of Fatima, it's a complicated story. I'll just sort of touch on it. But for those who don't know, in 1835, Batmen were found on the moon. Not Batman, that's a different thing. So what had happened was in August 1835, there was the newspaper The Sun, which is published in New York. It described a series of men with bat wings, unicorns, and bipedal beavers. Yes, bipedal beavers, in case you're wondering, that were seen on the moon's surface. And this ran again as a actual legitimate straight news story, not on April Fool's Day, which was just a few days ago. This is August 13th. And so this is a print. This is published in again 1835, and this is allegedly what astronomers with very powerful telescopes had seen on the moon. If you've seen the moon, you know that this is fanciful at best. Here on this image, though, you can see storks. You can see the bipedal beavers actually in the left-hand corner there. They're these they look like more like archangels to my mind instead of Batmen. They're in the foreground, but it's kind of cool, and I would. And the other thing I'm thinking, well, look at the angle on this, right? Like this would have been taken by someone drawing like who's already on the moon, not from our vantage point, but whatever. I'm getting out of the story. So let me wrap up the story. So basically, As you might imagine, this whole thing was a hoax. So, yes, indeed, the grand tradition of yellow journalism and newspapers making up stories dates back many years. Penny Dreadfuls in Victorian England, and the Sun as well. The circulation of the Sun jumped to almost 20,000, which of the time was just everywhere. That was sensational, and it really marked the beginning of tabloid journalism. And one of the reasons why this hoax was so successful was that it relied on experts and astronomers. So the Sun reported that, according to an astronomer, I think in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, he gave this person's name. It said he's an astronomer in South Africa, and with the most powerful telescopes available today, which of course the average person doesn't have access to these telescopes. It's the same thing as one of the same reasons why, for example, the moon landing urban legends, moon landing legends and conspiracies tend to proliferate, right? Because it's something where if NASA shares photos of the galaxy or the moon or what have you, people, you and I can't access it. We have to take NASA's word for it, or not, right? Or think it's all some big conspiracy. So there's that interesting sort of gap between what we can all see and experience and what the so-called experts are telling us. And in this case, of course, the experts were in many cases fictional. But it wasn't just the Sun, because in this particular case, other newspapers started reporting the same thing. So this is a case of, it's sort of the illusion of correlation, right? So you might say, well, this is crazy talk. The Sun is full of it. This is all a big hoax. But hold on, these other newspapers, which are legitimate newspapers, are reporting the same thing. Not because they were trying to perpetrate a hoax, but because they really thought that, you know, this was a real story, and they didn't want the Sun to scoop them. So let me move on to, as long as we're talking about the moon, we'll talk about werewolves. One of my favorite topics. I like this werewolf. It's kind of creepy, and the blood gets a little anyway. So yes, werewolves. So of course, you know, keep in mind that there's a long history and a tradition of people who say that the werewolves are real, for example. And anecdotally, of course, there was stories of people who reported that during full moons, more people went crazy. So this is a common belief among not just the public, but also in medical professions, is the idea that full moon nights are crazier, busier, and more dangerous than nights when the moon is dim. And you can kind of see why that would be, right? If as I mentioned, right, if the belief is that the moon is so powerful, it's affecting demons, well, certainly it can affect, you know, the rest of us. And so what can happen is, you know, I talked earlier, I mentioned earlier the fallacy post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore because of it. And you see the same thing happening in this case, and combined with the psychology of confirmation bias, right? So everybody knows when there's a full moon because you can see it. There's no mystery. It's not like you have to go back and check, right? So on the nights when if you're expecting that there will be crazier stuff going on during a full moon, if you're expecting bad, you know, worse drivers or more violence or whatever else, you will tend to notice that more often, regardless of whether it actually does occur more often during a full moon or not. If you're psychologically primed to expect that, you will tend to see it. And this is very common. This is nobody is immune to this, not doctors, not police officers, and so on. And there was an article that came out in Skeptical Inquirer magazine titled "The Moon Was Full and Nothing Happened." And it was research where Ivan Kelly, James Rotten, and Roger Culver did basically a meta-analysis, and they find that there was no lunar effect whatsoever. There were anecdotal stories that the moon was affecting people, but in fact, it wasn't. There is one exception, however. There may be more crime on the nights of a full moon. Now, you might think, well, hold on here. You're just telling us that the moon doesn't affect people. Well, there's an obvious explanation for it if you think about it, right? Because people are more active during full moons. There's more light to see. If you're drunk, you're out, your friends, whatever else. If you compare it with the night when there's no full moon, there's not light to go around, out ambient light, you're less likely to be out there. So it is technically true that there does tend to be more crime on those nights, but it's not attributable to the influence of the moon. It's simply human behavior because people tend to be out at night. So let me touch on werewolves because I've had this slide up for a while and I just like looking at it. So I'm gonna go to werewolves for a second. So there were traditionally several ways of creating werewolves. In ancient Greece, it's believed that a person could be transformed into the werewolf by eating the meat of a wolf that had been mixed with that of a human. So, in case somebody wants to try to make a werewolf, get human meat, get wolf meat, mix it up, and see what happens. Centuries later, there were other stories about of how werewolves came to be, and were sort of crawling in the darker recesses, particularly of Europe and elsewhere. One of them was that that a person could become a werewolf by being cursed. So, for example, a witch could create a werewolf or a jinn. Other beliefs were that if you were conceived during a full moon, again circling back to moons, that could actually make a person a werewolf, which is again, given how common full moons are, you would expect that there would actually be quite a number of werewolves out there. Other people said that no, that's all wrong, that's all crazy superstition. In fact, the way you become a werewolf is if you sleep under a full moon on a Friday. It's got to be a Friday. Sleeping under a full moon, it's dangerous anyway, as I mentioned, but on a Friday 13th, again, all these rumors and folklore are packed into them. And it was, and there's other versions. I mean, when you start talking about creatures that can transform. So anyway, the point here is that even though the full moon was only one of many different ways that people originally thought that werewolves could come into existence, that's the one. That's the one that to this day has stuck. So all the other ones, sleeping under a full moon on Fridays, being conceived under a full moon, those fall by the wayside because it's much more interesting to think about the full moon affecting people. And the first time I saw this was probably in the film, I think it was a John Landis film, An American Werewolf in London, which was a classic. I loved it, and including, of course, it had the Creedence Clearwater Revival song "Bad Moon Rising," which was awesome. So let me move on to eclipses. So again, we talked about the sun, we talked about the weather, we talked the moon, and here we have eclipses, which are, of course, a combination of the two. So again, as I talked about before, like these other phenomena, ancient peoples were looking for explanations and significance, right? Why is this happening, and what does it mean to us? What is this going to influence our lives? Is it going to cause curses? Is it going to cause droughts? Is it going to cause insanity? Is it going to cause werewolves? What the hell is going on? And this is, again, one of the common functions of folklore. And so in terms of the different explanations for eclipses, and again, this is all sort of, this is, in many cases, pre-scientific, pre-enlightenment. So, as I said before, in retrospect, we know exactly how and of course, when eclipses will happen. So this is something that's always struck me is that, psychics can't tell you when the next eclipse will be unless they look it up, and they use scientists to tell you, right? Astronomers can tell you precisely to the second when the next eclipse is and when these other phenomena are going to come about. So which has the predictive power? It's not the psychics. Anyway, so I'm going to touch on a couple examples of some of the folklore behind eclipses. So explanations include, for example, a monster devouring the sun, a punishment from the gods for human errors, and a prelude, of course, to the apocalypse. Hence the eschatology I mentioned in the opening. So you have these different people who will sort of see these again, the post hoc ergo propter hoc phenomenon, right? You have this eclipse. There's lunar eclipses, there's solar eclipses, and there's subcategories of each one. But here, for example, we're seeing a solar eclipse, and you see animals acting weird, which of course to be expected, right? You have animals which are in many cases, of course, tied to the circadian rhythm as humans and everyone else is, right? So if they're nocturnal and they sleep at night, they wake during the daytime, and so on. And if you have, even temporarily, if you have the sun being blotted out, animals notice, people notice. It's a big thing. There was an eclipse not too far long ago, and I remember watching my cat, and he was really confused. He's like, "What is going on here?" He didn't freak out. He didn't, but it was clearly the cat was nonplussed. Usually he's sleeping, of course, but he woke up. He woke up long enough to be baffled, and then, frankly, he was not as impressed as I was by the whole thing. But there are other examples as well. For example, in South America, the Manansi people in eastern Bolivia believe that the sun is a man and the moon, more gentle and feminine, is the female, as I touched on before, and was his sister. And they believe that eclipses are caused by celestial serpents that attack them. So sun and the moon, male, female out there, and these giant sky serpents will attack and eat them, and this is what happens during eclipses. And keep in mind, so the other part of the story, of course, is that the serpents always lose, right? I mean, think about it. Like, eclipses always, the eclipses are not permanent. So in many cases, they last a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. If you're lucky, in totality, I think the totality in this upcoming eclipse, I think it's 4 minutes and 10 seconds or something. So the point here is that if you believe this, right, if this is part of your mythology, in your cosmology, the good news is that every time so far in recorded history, the sun and the moon have managed to fight off those mean sky serpents. Now, hopefully, if we're good and we pray to the gods or make sacrifices, what have you, this will continue. But it's always this notion of, like, the serpents are defeated, but maybe next time. In other groups, for example, in Brazil, eclipses are caused by an eternal bat, or in some cases a jaguar, which gnaws on the sun or the moon. So again, you have this notion of these all-powerful suns and moons, males, females, what have you, being attacked or eaten by or swallowed by or attempted to be swallowed by these animals, these figures. And of course that makes sense, right? Because we're imposing our worldviews on the skies, on the heavens, right? So if you're living, for example, in South America or Europe or anywhere else, there's danger in wild animals, right? People, they will eat you. Africa, elephants, tigers, take your pick, bears in North America, and so on. So even though today, of course, there are still wild animal attacks, most of them are in zoos, but this notion of something being eaten by a wild feral animal was not particularly far-fetched. As I mentioned, again, I talked about this in eastern Bolivia, the sun and the moon. Here's a commemorative stamp depicting the sky being eaten by Batara, the god of darkness. This was in 2016, and I love this Indonesian stamp, because there's you see the three parts of the eclipse, and you see in the middle one, you see this figure of the god of darkness eating eating the sun, literally there, right? So and then, of course, as all these stories do, of course, they end up winning. So that's one of the cool parts about it, is you see these eclipses going on, and all these different explanations for it. And keep in mind that eclipses were particularly disquieting to people who were more vulnerable. So if you were wealthy, if you weren't that tied to whether there's droughts or lightning or things like that, you didn't care as much, right? Because your livelihood didn't depend on it. On the other hand, as I mentioned before, if you were a sailor, if you were a farmer, if you were a subsistence farmer, if you were somebody whose livelihood and maybe your family depended on reading the skies accurately and predicting the next eclipse and things like that. That was more serious. And you also saw, for example, that pregnant women tended to be thought to be more vulnerable, especially if they gazed at the sun or the moon. For example, there was a legend that if a pregnant woman looked at the moon, that either she or the child might become a rat or some animal that was typically isn't seen during the daytime, or might be afflicted by some deformity. For example, the hair lip. And of course, the hair lip, is the mouth deformity, and part of that comes from the hair. And again, going back to hares and rabbits in folklore, there was this notion of maternal impressions. For example, the idea that if a woman was frightened by something, frightened by a wild animal, or frightened by an eclipse, or frightened by anything, that impression could be transferred to the unborn child. There was a scene in I think it was The Elephant Man, the film, I'm forgetting the year, I think 77, 78 or something. There was about the story of John Merrick, the Elephant Man. And there's a scene I recall where there's this herd of elephants that you see coming across the screen. And the idea was that this real life character, John Merrick, who was this deformed man, that he was deformed because his mother had been frightened by a herd of elephants. And so you see that depicted in that film there. I remember there was that when I was digging around in terms of some of the legend stories, in Kentucky, it was believed that an eclipse is always indicated 5 consecutive days of rain, and that the potatoes specifically needed to be planted in the dark of the moonlight. So if you got potatoes, wait till the next full moon, and or make sure there's no moon at all. And corn has to be planted in the light of the moon. So again, once again we see the association of moon phases and light and sun and moon tied with agriculture and things like that. I'm going to wrap up here, and then I'll take some questions. But I did want to sort of talk about what all this means in terms of science and communication, right? So part of my job as a researcher, as a folklorist, as a skeptic, is to try and reconcile legends and stories and myths and what's true and what's not true. And even though I have sort of explained many cases and many stories about legends and rumors about moon and the sun and eclipses and so on, in Richard Dawkins' book Unweaving the Rainbow, which is my favorite of his books, he talks about how knowing the science behind the rainbow doesn't detract from its beauty. He writes, "Mysteries do not lose their poetry when solved. Quite the contrary. The solution often turns out to be more beautiful than the puzzle, and, in any case, when you have solved one mystery, you uncover others, perhaps to inspire greater poetry." And I sort of see that as partly when I'm giving lectures, when I'm talking to people about some of these legends and stories, I don't see that as being negative or debunking or being being a negative Nelly, or being negative. I see it as showing a different side to these things, saying, hey, even though we know for a fact that the the eclipse is not caused by a serpent in the sky or a jaguar eating the sun, the truth behind it is even more interesting than ever. And as I mentioned, just to wrap up the quote, he says, after offering a rich and elegant explanation of the optics and physics of rainbows, Dawkins asks, could anyone seriously suggest that it spoils it to be told what is going on inside all those thousands of falling, sparkling, reflecting, and refracting populations of raindrops? I think not. So again, I'm going to wrap up with there. Hopefully you've enjoyed this talk, and I'm open to some Q&A. If people want to read more about me and Skeptical Inquirer magazine, that is Skeptical Inquirer right there. That's the April 2023 issue. I've been the deputy editor for 26 years now. I also have a podcast called Squaring the Strange, which you can see there. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. And these are some of my books. I've written, I think, 13 at latest count. Most recently, it was an edited book with Ken Frazier, the lead editor of SI, who appears in that photo right there, the great Ken Frazier. So anyway, if you're interested in the sort of work that I do and the sort of work that Skeptical Inquirer does, check us out and check out the magazine.
All right, thank you, Ben. That was excellent. Very, very interesting. A lot of fun things for us to look into. We do have a couple questions that have come in from our friends here at CFI Western New York, and of course, we invite everybody who's attending this virtually with us to use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen to submit questions, and I'll look through a few of those. Let's see if we can get through a couple here. So throughout your lecture, Ben, you were bringing up a lot of examples throughout history, and one question we had was on the con of the Batman and the Sun Sun newspaper, right? And it made me think of some of what we've seen around the upcoming eclipse, and some of the fake information, and some of the bad equipment that we've seen come out, including uh, um, false glasses, right? The ones that are
Right,
not ISO certified.
right.
And I just thought maybe you could share some thoughts on. Yes, hopefully those are ISO certified.
Yes,
But
yes,
you can
that'd
see
be
not only some price gouging on the good equipment, but some bad, faulty equipment out there that could really be putting people in danger. So I'm just wondering, in the scope of this, if you could provide some thoughts on, how to be a good consumer in this space, what things you should keep an eye out for, um, so you're not getting conned in these
Yeah,
spaces.
sure. And that sort of speaks to the sort of commercialization of the eclipse, right? Which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with capitalism in the eclipse. I mean, there is price gouging, as I'm sure you've heard. People, there people along the path of totality, going through Texas and up through Buffalo. You can't buy a room, these days. I mean, thousands of dollars. So but yeah, so I mean, part of it is the commercialization of it. And I did see a couple people sort of grumbling about, well, what's the big deal? It's just an eclipse. Yeah, but it's an eclipse is something that sort of democratizes astronomy, right? It's something we can all see, ideally with ISO certified glasses. But it's something, I mean, and here's the thing, if you're annoyed by all the eclipse talk, wait a few minutes. It's fine. You'll be fine. Deal with the rest of us thinking this is really cool. You'll be fine. It'll go away soon enough. So, but yeah, the point that you brought up about the glasses, that's especially problematic, right? Because it's something where you have to get them from a reliable source. Because I mean, this could damage your eye permanently, right? This is not something to go cheap on.
Mhm.
And it's really unethical and frightening to have people sort of, oh, it's a dark thing, we'll sell them for $5, whatever it is. And I mean, it's just, this could permanently damage someone's eye. So again, my advice would be to get them from your local astronomy club, get them from reputable sources, not some guy on the street saying, hey, give me a couple bucks, I'll take it. And you can also check on these. So for example, this one here has the Charlie Bates astronomy project. And so, it has these, so look for some of the certifications. Now, again, can it be counterfeited? Of course, anything can be counterfeited, but you're more likely to get quality protective eyewear from a reputable source. Again, astronomy clubs are a perfect example, and they're happy to. I mean, at this point, I mean, it's Friday, so at this point, if you don't have it yet, there may be harder to get. But I even saw someone in my local grocery store. Just I was getting milk and bread, and these were on sale there. So
Mhm.
that's the sort of thing you can check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we worked with the Buffalo Eclipse Consortium here to make sure that we had glasses available, not only for our attendees here at the center, but all across Western New York. And the county bought somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of glasses and was distributing them for free. So they are readily available out there. And we do have extras here. So if you're in the Western New York area, whether or not you're going to be viewing with us, you can coordinate with us to get some of our extra glasses. And we're looking to participate in the Astronomers Without Borders program. We're actually going to be collecting some glasses and giving them out to them. And hopefully they're able to turn over some of that for the upcoming eclipses out in Spain and North Africa in the next few years. So if you do your research and checking, I saw the ones you had there were from Rainbow Symphony. They're definitely a reputable source. But yeah, check with your local astronomy club. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, just keep in mind that this doesn't work.
Yes, nor do regular sunglasses, right? Even really
Right.
dark ones. You really need to find that ISO certification. All
Right.
that information is available on the NASA website on our CFI Eclipse page, and you can always reach out to us if you have any questions. But we had another question here from our Western New York group. So you brought up a lot of examples of these, obviously a bunch of legends throughout history. Do you have any favorites from the ones that you shared today? And specifically,
Oh,
I know you have done a little bit of research into some of these. You've written on a couple of them. Are there any in particular, like if you had to pick one that you could go back and be there while they were witnessing these things, or be a part of the Batman controversy, all of that? Is there
yeah.
one that stands out to you that you'd want to see with your own eyes?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably my favorite, and I sort of touched on it, is the werewolves, just because it's so the association between werewolves and the moon light is so strong. And that's not uncommon, right? For example, with vampires, it's sunlight, right? So sunlight attracts, attacks, sunlight kills them. So again, when you have this sort of, you have these sort of these classic monsters, hammer film monsters, and each of them has some association with some of the elements. Again, in the cases, vampires, the sun, monsters, moon, and vampires, and you all again just sort of other elements that we see around us. I mean, for example, there's a strong belief that iron, the metal iron, will repel werewolves, and also vampires as well. In the case of zombies, if you look at the original Haitian zombies, there was this belief that if you find a zombie working, particularly in Haiti, if you put some salt on their lips, that will break the spell. So again, you have this. That's what I find really interesting, is sort of how the legends and folklore has sort of taken the things that are all around us and sort of incorporated them into these supernatural beliefs. And again, I touched before about the this notion of the sun and the moon being these entities that are still in danger of animal like entities, giant serpents and jaguars and things like that. So probably one of my favorites would be the werewolves. It's kind of a cop out, but it's true. So those are some of my favorites. But yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to, I'd like to think that had I been around for the Batman and the Moon story, I like to think I'd be skeptical. I'd be like, well, guys, I don't think that, but you don't know. It could have been, I'd be like, oh, did you read the paper? Did you see what they had? They found them on them. This is a drawing, but this is based on what the astronomers are seeing, I'm sure. So we all like to think we would be the heroes of the story, but we might have been the people flogging it for all we know.
Sure, and you made a good point during the lecture about how, the people of that time, didn't have a lot of access to even basic astronomy equipment, so they wouldn't have been able to even test this in the most basic level themselves. I'm wondering then, like, have you seen any trends in terms of, when these types of legends have spiked throughout history? I mean, you mentioned a couple more recent examples, but now a lot of people have better access to these things either through local astronomy clubs or their own personal. It's a lot more accessible to get astronomy equipment. But also, I was thinking as you were going through this that we're also in a situation where we have a lot less access to the night sky. I mean, there's
Mhm.
so much more light pollution, and people aren't seeing as much of the night sky as they used to. So, do you have any comments on perhaps uh, the trends of how these legends have popped up and whether or not we're still seeing a lot of that today?
Yeah, there's a couple things that jump to mind. One is that typically these legends and also conspiracy theories, because many of them are sort of part and parcel, right? Like the moon landing hoax is the obvious example. Oftentimes, and also as you and I both touched on in terms of the Batman and the moon hoax, what happens, there's a gap in expertise, right? There is what us common folk can see and taste and experience and see, and then there is this other level of interpretation that the priests or the scientists or someone has put themselves in a position where they claim to be able to access other information we don't have, right? In a religious context, we're talking priests and rabbis and imams, right? They've studied the religion, they have a better idea of God and Allah than we do, so we go to them to ask them help us understand the world above us, in some cases literally and figuratively. And as I mentioned before, in some cases we have to do the same thing with NASA, right? As I said, you can buy decent telescopes, but I mean the sorts of things the images they're getting, Hubble, things like that, we have no direct access to that. If NASA releases a photograph of some distant galaxy, we have to take their word for it, right? I mean, I there's no reason to doubt it, but we don't we have to trust that they're doing that. And so and you see the same thing, for example, with for example Area 51, where or any military base where there are legitimate reasons for secrecy. There's legitimate reasons why they don't want everyone to know what they're doing there. They're testing new spacecraft, their new aircraft, whatever else. Ooh, I made a slip, guys. Yes, they're testing spacecraft. Um, but yeah, again, so oftentimes, again, when there is that information gap, when there is this gap between what we think, what we can see and taste and experience, and what people are saying, that vacuum tends to be filled with conspiracy and legends, right? So it goes back to what I was talking about before, of the function of these legends, right? They're providing explanation, interpretation, right? They're whether it's right or wrong, it's filling a need. It's filling a need to say this is why this is happening, whether it's eclipse, whether it's what have you. And keep in mind that this is a long-standing tradition, right? I mean, in many cases, when you look back at witchcraft accusations and accusations of even vampires, for example, in Europe, the these legends arose because of some unexplained phenomena, right? There's a drought, there's a stillbirth, there's lightning strike, something weird happened. What do we do? Well, why did it happen? Blame somebody, blame the witch, blame the old woman down the road, blame the dead guy that we buried 2 weeks ago, dig him up and stake him because he's responsible for this, right? So there's this underlying theme, and Dawkins talks about that some in his book, and also for those who haven't seen Carl Sagan's book, The Demon Haunted World, excellent primer on that. So in all these cases, again, you have this lack of knowledge that's filled by folklore and legends, and it's no wonder these sorts of stories emerge.
Absolutely. All right, Ben. Well, thank you. It looks like we are just about out of time. We had one last question that came in asking about whether or not this video would be made available, and it will indeed be on the Center for Inquiry YouTube channel within the next few days. So if you'd like to go back and watch, get some of the examples that Ben has provided for us tonight, you will be able to do that on the Center for Inquiry YouTube. Ben, is there anything else you'd like to say about what you're working on now, or what people can expect from you, or perhaps give them information about how they can contact you if they have any questions?
Sure. I'm around and about. Again, you can find me in Skeptical Inquirer magazine. I've written a column for that for many years. The next issue will be out in a few weeks, and in that article, the cover is on AI and in AI technologies and this and that. And my article in that piece is on how AI can be used to combine with folklore to identify and mitigate conspiracy theories online. So there's some really interesting research in terms of using AI to say, okay, what are these conspiracies? What is their format? Like if you diagrammed a conspiracy theory, how can we train AI to recognize those and fight them? And so we have a heads up in terms of AI. So that's interesting. Again, I have a podcast called Squaring the Strange. We recently celebrated our 6th anniversary, 6 years of
Awesome.
podcasting.
Congratulations.
So it's kind of cool. Shout out to my co-host Pascal Romero and Celestia Ward. And yeah, I'm here and there. I'm on Facebook, occasionally on Twitter when I have time. So yeah, and again, if you're interested in the work that I do and we do, I've written many books. Kenny Biddle is out there. Mick West. We have a great stable of researchers and investigators and authors and experts across the board. So so if you're interested in what we do, check it out.
Indeed, absolutely. I really look forward to reading that article on AI. That is a problem we'll be dealing with well into the future here. So go ahead and subscribe to Skeptical Inquirer, everyone. All right, thank you, Ben. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Eric.